King.
Mr Chairman, we're down to the business end of this bill, and it is time for some answers from the Minister, because in effect he has become the Select Committee, the public, the officials, the arbiter, the judge and the jury on this bill. He started his contribution in the committee stage by telling us it was a very well-worded bill. Well, we would first of all say, Minister, if that's well-worded, it reflects your muddled thinking. It's a very woolly-worded bill. You also said it's grammatically correct. Well, I'm sure we've got some people on this side who can go through and see if we've got the apostrophes in the right places, or maybe Hekia Parata, our Minister of Education, might like to go through. But the Minister's all... But maybe she doesn't need to, because the Minister was crowing about how it's grammatic, as if that was very important. He then said there were some less mathematically erudite people amongst us. Well, the Minister, if he is so mathematically erudite, please explain the missing P. That's what I want you to explain to us, Minister. Tell us about the missing P in your formula. Because in your first formula you put up, you had 2 P's in it, and now you've got 1 P. So for those who don't know what the formula is, the formula that we now have is SR plus SUR equals SP plus SUP multiplied by brackets A divided by B minus P. But in the old one, there was another P. Now, I don't know where your R is at the last bit.
On page 3.
On page 3. Well, but however, I'm on page 1. And I'm reading out your amendments, Minister. Your amendments. So I want you to tell this House and the listeners, who will be very interested in how mathematically erudite you are, what the missing P meant. Why was there 2 P's in the old formula last week and only 1 P this week? Now, I think this is important, because the Minister told us how erudite he is, how he knows algebra, and he could tell us what it meant. So, Minister, in a minute, get on your feet and tell us about the missing P, because I thought that was a pretty arrogant sort of a speech, telling people in here that you understood it and they didn't, and maybe there are people here who don't. That is not a criticism of them, and everybody has a right to question you, Minister, on what your legislation means. You also said, Minister, that David Farrar, the trusted blogger of the National Party, who's now at this very moment blogging up in Northland, polling up in Northland to see if they're going to win or not, their very reliable blogger, their pollster, when he put up a blog, according to the Minister, he got it totally wrong. When he talked about, he said he used Statistics New Zealand Quality Employment Survey. He also said, to his surprise, it did not save any money. He was talking about the brains trust in the National Cabinet who put this together. He said MPs would have got even larger pay increases using the Prime Minister's preferred methodology. Under the new law, Minister, if this law had been in place for the last 6 years, 5 years, there would have been an average increase of 3.1. Is that right, Minister?
I explained the context.
Is that right, Minister?
I remember, wasn't listening.
No, it doesn't matter, Minister. You're there to answer the question. My job's to ask them. He can't answer it because, and under the current law, the average would be 1.7. That's what David Farrar said. He has not withdrawn it. He hasn't withdrawn it. So I would like the Minister to give David Farrar a little tinkle on the phone and tell him to write a new blog, because thousands of New Zealanders read that and they laughed. They laughed at a government who brought in a bill last week who had to put it on the shelf for a week because they hadn't got something right. But we're not allowed to know what we didn't get right in that bill, because the Minister hasn't explained what went wrong last week. So, Minister, when you get a chance, can you stand up and tell us why we were not debating the bill last week? Because apart from the missing P, Mr. Chairman,
Honourable King.
apart from the missing P, there has been very little, it seems to me, that has changed. So, Mr. Speaker, the member has got some answers he needs to give. I want to also address some of the issues he then diverted into. And I thought, well, this must be a wide-ranging debate, because he then could go back 7 years to talk about the previous Labor government. And he said we were a government that spend. Well, can I say to the minister, you've been a government that has cut. And you've had tax cuts. Tax cuts not for the ordinary people who are on low wages, who don't get big pay increases. Tax cuts for those who already had the most. But worse than that, reduced the public service with lots of smokes and mirrors. And the way you do it with smokes and mirrors is to say you're reducing the total number. We're taking the back room to the front office. And then we go to our financial reviews, Minister, and we go through the financial reviews and we find out that, oh yes, they might have reduced some numbers from the back office. They've now been relabelled and they've got new names. And we've now got a whole lot of consultants that have taken over from the public service. So when you see the actual figures, the number of public servants that are now employed by the National Party are slightly higher than they were under a Labor government, and the minister just made a lot of noise about it. And I have to say, Minister, you know when a government isn't in control, and it's what I call the couch measure, the expenditure on couches. You see, under a national government, they spent thousands on couches for the bottoms of the HFA people and for their former Minister Jenny Shipley. And what do we have now? We have Moby spending thousands of dollars on couches. You see, that's how they are hiding their expenditure, by putting it into fancy fitting. So, Minister, don't give us a lecture on what happened in the past, because we can give you one right back, and I think ours is probably a better one. And can I just conclude, Mr. Speaker, the Remuneration Authority was given a job to do, and today they have become the whipping boys and girls for the minister, because they did the job as they were required to under the law. They made a determination. We don't like the determination. We don't want their determination, but they made a determination. And then the minister said that by their best analysis, by the Remuneration Authority's best analysis, they gave pay increases to CEOs. And what are we complaining about? Well, they did the same for members of parliament, and we are complaining. So I want to know, why not fetter the Remuneration Authority's ability to give big pay increases to CEOs? That would be fair, because this bill is to make it fair for members of parliament when it comes to their remuneration. It should be fair. We should not be getting greater pay increases than other New Zealanders. But neither should CEOs, and that part is not being addressed by this government. They're running away and running scared from it. So I say, Mr. Chairman, we will support this bill, but I believe, Minister, and I predict that the Minister will be back in a year's time doing a Mr. Bridges, correcting yet another mistake in rust legislation that has not had the scrutiny it ought to have. Could have achieved what the government wanted if they hadn't spent 5 years talking about it, and could have brought in legislation that went to a select committee, but have had to do it so they can stop members getting the pay increases that were given by the Remuneration Authority. So perhaps a bit better planning, a bit more mathematically erudite in terms of working out your timetable in Parliament might work, Mr. Chairman.